Greetings and welcome back to CS284 Fundamentals of Cybersecurity. We're on week 9, lesson 1. Today's topic is ethics. Alright, so we're going to go over this. Probably should have put this at the very beginning of the class, but I really haven't taught you how to hack or anything, just kind of taught you how everything works. But this is an important concept. It's why there is an ethical hacker, right? You have permission to do what you're doing. And this is also going to go with our next lesson of cybersecurity law. So the ethics and law kind of can go hand in hand together, as you're going to see throughout these lessons. So we're going to understand what ethics is, why it's important, how to act ethically, and then the responsibility comes with knowing these principles. You have the power to do stuff that can get yourself into a lot of trouble and just be unethical. And then we're going to talk about some real world situations. But first, here's our review. Remember the risk matrix. When you do a risk analysis, you need to go through all the different things you can possibly think of. What are ways attacks? What are your vulnerabilities? And then, what's the probability that they can get into them? Maybe it's not very likely that it'll even happen. And even if it does, it doesn't really matter. But maybe it's super rare. It's, we got firewalls and it's not even connected to the internet. But it might be, if they get to it, it's extreme, so still bumps it up to medium. Whereas where you really want to focus, if you can, is down here in the red, and that's why you make this chart. And then disaster recovery and business continuity, essentially making sure that if a disaster happens, you can recover and continue with your business. And we go through this process is much like the risk assessment. You're going to do your impact risk analysis of disasters. And then that way okay, how can I bring my systems up again? And remember, this could not necessarily be an event. It might not be a hack. It could be a flood. It could be a fire. How are you going to keep your systems safe? Identify the stakeholders, who needs a system. The HR department has their files. The marketing team has all their customer contacts. Train the plan. Make sure that you've actually, at least on paper, tested out how we're going to get our system up and running again. Maintain your plan, audit that plan. It kind of goes with that train. Make sure you test it every so often, and then reflect and just kind of do the cycle again, much like the risk assessment rather. All right, so ethics. What is ethics? Why ethics? It promotes a sense of fairness, creates a set of rules, acceptable behaviors. It also helps identify what is unacceptable looks and feels like. And we'll go over some concepts in a little bit, but this is the what is. It's just basically standards for right and wrong. What we should do in different situations. They can be both written and unwritten. And this is where this stuff's going to come. So as you start thinking about this, written is, again, still not law necessarily. We're going to go into law next lesson, but written might be your mission statements, your school policies, on academic dishonesty, right? It's not illegal to cheat on a test. However, your school might say, well, you didn't actually do it, you didn't learn, so you're not going to get the grade because you cheated. It's unethical to do it because you're not actually showing you did it. But then there's also unwritten rules, like don't cut in line. Again, it's not illegal to cut in line. However, people are not going to be so kind to you, and they might, move you to the back anyway. So again, it's an unwritten rule of ethics. A lot of this is society driven, and then not everyone does this. People have different ethics, but if someone's behind you, holding the door open for them, or someone's about to come to the elevator, you don't let it slam in their face, so there's one less person in there. These are concepts of ethics where it's doing the right thing when no one's looking. So there's all kinds of places you get them. Laws. Those are enforceable ethics, but how you feel, how society is working, what religion you are, what philosophy you have on life, and then a lot of it, and this all is intertwined. Family might have help push all of that as well. So these are places. Is it right and okay to do stuff? There are people out there that believe if you leave something out in the open, it's fair game. They can take that. That is their ethics. So again, we want to talk about having good ethics, because that is not a good ethic. when you're working with, and some of it, this is where it gets into gray areas as we're going to do some of the scenarios and whatnot. But again, you need courage, right? You see something, you say something, do the right thing. Be willing to go against your friends or peers. They want you to do something, that's unethical. Don't being ethical is not doing that. Stand up to bullies. And then humility, right? Have the humility to, you can accidentally do something, right? Are you better than the average driver? I mean, there's a 50% chance you're not, right? So again, are you more ethical than the average person? Realize, and really this is going to make you think about, should I do this? Again, a lot of these are going to have, kind of ethical answers, but again, the gray area. So do think about the social consequences, right? If this is one thing to think about, I always saw this with the ethics classes I've taken. If whatever you were about to do is going to go in the newspaper and your mom or dad or everyone is going to read it, would you do it, right? Would you do what you're doing? Would you write the program you're going to write? Would you do the system that you're going to do, whatever you might be doing? And do always use computers in ways that's considerate of everyone. And this kind of goes with my next point. Do think of a computer like a backpack or a locker, right? You wouldn't just go into someone's computer locker or backpack or locker, right, and just dig through their stuff without permission, right? These are things to think about. Treat it with respect. Just because it's digits, just because you can, doesn't mean you should. So don't use a computer to harm other people. Don't interfere with other people's computer work. Don't snoop on their files. This kind of goes back to the think of a computer like a backpack or lock. Don't use a computer to steal. Some of this stuff goes to law. That's illegal. Don't use a computer to bear false witness. A lot of these things are just, whether it be in person or not. Don't bear false. Don't lie, right? Don't lie. Don't use a computer to help yourself lie. This is one where a lot of people have their gray area, but ethically, don't copy and use proprietary software for which you have not paid, right? That is a big thing. And again, this is also in the legality realms. It's illegal to do so, especially to share it. I think that's the key to share it, but at the end of the day, it is unethical to do so. And do not use other people's computer resources without authorization or proper compensation. So again, make sure you're paying for what you need to pay for. All right, let's get into the case studies so we can kind of take a look at how this works. Because again, it's a gray area as you're walking through this. So Terry Childs, basically his story is, and again, this is a link, so come back and read it if you want. Hopefully, again, you're watching this movie. Click on this link, analyze it real quick, pause. All right, come back, and we're going to go ahead and kind of talk about it, because basically he worked for a company. There were some holes in the system. He told them about the holes. They didn't do anything about it, so he went ahead and essentially hacked their own system and say, hey, look, I told you I could do it. I did it. And they threw the book at him, right? Because what he did was illegal, right? He had no permission. We talked about the white hat hackers. He had no permission to do so. Now, again, was it ethical? He was trying to help them. But again, remember, good intentions don't mean ethical. That's why they have the white hat hacker. That's why you exhaust every piece of forms. But again, it's a catch-22. What if they would have came back and said, why didn't you fix all this stuff? He was like, I couldn't. I told you what I could do. So again, that gray area. But at the end of the day, it is a gray area. So in your mind, should he have been arrested? Right? He was just trying to get tell the company, hey, you guys need to watch out for this. So think about that. I mean, again, he broke the law. He did not have permission. That was not what they paid him for. So at the end of the day, by our laws, he was legally arrested. So something to think about for that one. This one, and this is kind of where people put their own ethics. This is a great example of ethics, like stealing someone's bike that was left out in the front yard, or finding a pencil on the ground next to someone and just picking it up and walking away when it's clearly the person who just dropped it. Again, to all their own. Some of you might have no problem with that, but it's still technically stealing. In this case, again, go ahead and click on the link, pause if you want to read it first, and then come back. But this guy kicked a puppy 5 times. Now, while I believe most of us can agree that's really disgusting, should he have been forced to resign, right? I mean, I guess depending on where you're at, that could technically be illegal. But, you know, did it have anything to do with the company? Did he do a poor job in his company? I mean, as you're looking at that, I mean, there are people out there that have no problem kicking a puppy. Right, wrong, and different. You know, that is their ethics. So this is where it goes to the the gray area where most people are not okay with it, which is why I believe there is actually laws saying you can't abuse animals. So there is the key thing, but it's an interesting ethics quandary, right? You're not necessarily allowed to kick a puppy. However, you're allowed to put a mouse trap out that doesn't always kill it instantly. At times that the mouse trap might just catch its leg and it sits there and starves to death. So again, it's interesting ethics quandary, because what's really, in the grand scheme of things, what's more valuable? Why is a dog more valuable than a mouse, right? Just because, again, we go back to society norms, our norms, our family, our upbringing. In some countries, they eat dog. So, again, in this case, I mean, most ethics are for us, that believe that you shouldn't be able to kick dogs. So maybe he should or shouldn't be forced to resign. But again, should people be able to put that ethic on other people? Something to think about as we're going through ethics. All right, this last one. This one's a little bit more on the positive side. This guy is a Subway Superman again. Click on this link if you want to get the full story. But the gist of it is, someone fell into the subway. This dude jumped down, picked him up, got him out before the train was in the station. Right, so he saved lives. Right, this guy was able to save things. And this is ethics. Should you have done the same thing? Right? Could you have done the same thing? Because that's the first question. Could you have jumped down, picked someone up when a train is coming? I think you got out barely in time. And then should you be obligated, right? So the ethics, and should people be obligated to help people? Should you have to do the right thing? Different ethics. And this is where I think, obviously there's no question that what he did was ethical. The question is, should he have had to do it, right? Should that be the expectation, is that you do the right thing? And this is going to go with some of these scenarios that we're going to get to in a little bit, of doing the right thing versus doing the right thing. There's a movie SWAT. One of their quotes is, sometimes doing the right things, not doing the right thing. So we'll get to these concepts because it is interesting, but a lot of it's going to go back to company policy. And just if you were to, I mean, I love this concept. If you were to get caught and it was to publish in the newspaper, your parents read it, your guardian, whatever, everyone, grandma reads it, would you still do it? Would you still have done it if everyone knows that you did that? If everyone hey, you just stole that bike off that dude's lawn. I mean, a lot of people's ethics are, if I can get away with it, it's okay. However, the concept of ethics are, if you get caught, would you be okay with it, with everyone knowing that you did that? So that's what we're going to think about ethics. So here's our little activity, hack, no hack. There's a few scenarios. So Emily posts a picture of your friend Jaden. Picture, make it look like he's consuming alcohol. Of course, your friend's very upset and she refuses to take down. He wants your help. Jaden, your friend, wants to help into removing the picture. So, here are scenarios. Again, pause this, read it through, but basically, you don't want him to get in trouble, so you help him out. You use a tool found on the internet to get into her system and remove the picture. You let Jaden know. B, you let Jaden know that Instagram allows people to report images by the rules. You help Jaden contact them. You don't want to be a bad friend, so you help him remove the picture. Then you change the password so she can't repost the picture. Later, you borrow a phone and delete the picture, and then it's all over. And then you explain to Jaden that it's his fault and suck it up, right? So those are the 4 scenarios, the 4 solutions to the scenario, rather, I guess. And we can see, I mean, the most ethical one, hopefully we see the most ethical one is, report the image to Instagram, try to do the procedures and everything like that. But again, I mean, you could probably see people falling into number C or letter C, where they're like, you know what? All right, let's not only remove the picture, but let's change her password so she can't repost it again. And if we can, hack into her phone as well and delete the picture, so you never have to deal with it again. So even with A, she could in theory just repost that photo real quick. So what is the what are your ethics? The most ethical thing is B. A is, I'm not sure if the thing is such as a little illegal, but technically this is illegal. And then C is super illegal. And then D is, maybe a thing. Hey, deal with it, buddy. You shouldn't have taken that photo. These are all, what are your ethics as you're looking through this? All right. So hopefully, if you have someone to discuss this with, discuss it with them. There is a scenario 4 that you're going to do as an activity. So you will actually have to discuss scenario 4 together in the forums on Canvas. But let's go with this one. Am I still responsible? So basically, the gist of this story, if you want to, again, pause it and read over it, is a couple pages. But basically, an intern left his computer open. Your supervisor, you guys are both in the IT, your supervisor go in, and since his computer was insecure, he changed the desktop background to a kitten. She's not comfortable, but it's her supervisor. He says, not as a big deal. This is going to teach him a lesson. And then she was like, oh, well, since we're doing it anyway, let's make it My Little Ponies instead. So, have they acted ethically? Why or why not? And did they do anything illegal? I mean, his computer was unlocked. My guess is, especially because it is the company and that was the IT supervisor, that it is not necessarily illegal, but what are ethics? And this is where some of the stuff goes back to, what is your company policy? What is your company policy? What are you trying to do? What is your company's morals? I mean, that's done. I mean, I've seen students do that in here before. A student will not log out, they'll leave. The next student comes in, changes the background to make sure to let them know, like, hey, you're not logging your computer. And that's really one of the only ways to do it. You can't just leave a note for the person, and expect them to get it the next day after 7 periods of other people sitting there. So, I mean, obviously the intern comes back. He's not super happy. At the end of the day, should she have to take blame for the situation because she did not stop the supervisor from doing it? Again, the gray area, right? I mean, IT departments purposely send out emails to convince staff to give up the password to show them they're not doing the right thing. So is this, is what, your stance on practical jokes, right? This is, a gray area. It's not illegal. Maybe, that is something that the supervisor is allowed to do, like the company policy or anything like that. I wouldn't imagine that actually literally in the policy, but, the supervisors are expected to make sure their employees do the right thing, and that was something that he felt would help remember it, because like you come in and there's some weird photo, you're like, oh man, I really need to remember to close my lock down my computer when I leave, and it's really not malicious. So a lot of people's ethics in this case would probably say, no harm, no foul. He can change it back, and hopefully it's actually making them learn a lesson. But again, remember, good intentions don't make it necessarily ethical. So good questions. What would you do? Would you stop the person? This is goes back to the ethical concepts of doing the right thing when no one's looking. And again, if this did make it to the paper, I'm sure most people probably wouldn't care. The paper's like, hey, this person changed the desktop. But again, concepts to think about as we're going through these. All right. Another scenario. We're getting towards the end of these. Privileged information. All right, so Jessica has a group project due tomorrow. The final copy, and this is hopefully, other than, going over the ethics of this, don't let yourself be in this situation. I think Google makes this a lot easier, but, Derek has the only copy, and he gets sick. Non-answers the phone. If you don't turn in the paper, you're gonna either, it depends on the teacher, you might get no grade, you're gonna get a lower grade, and there's nothing you can do. But however, for whatever reason, and this is where we talk about the nice little person standing behind her back, the shoulder surfing, that she saw what his password is. So, should she use the password? And that's number one. Letter A, use a password and then tell him that he should probably change his password. C, should she tell the teacher the situation and ask the teacher to make an exception? And then should she log in the account, get the assignment, then change the password and let him know what his new password is, which I guess would be kind of pointless because then she still knows his new password. But anyway, again, it goes back to, the most ethical thing is to tell the teacher the situation. The problem is, what if the teacher says tough, right? Then this isn't necessarily a good solution. You're like, oh, well, I guess we'll just keep calling him teacher and then, go in and find the situation. So your ethics. I'll be honest. If I was a student back in college and this was a major grade and I knew the person's password and they weren't answering their phone, it's not fair. That's a lot of people's ethics are based on fairness, right? Why should I do this? If I was in college, I'd probably do B, which is get the password, get the assignment, turn it in. I would try C first. C first. As soon as we found out, call the teacher right away. Whatever we can do, email the teacher. And if they're like tough, well, I'm gonna get it real quick. And then as soon as I run into Derek, I'm like, hey man, probably should have changed your password anyway because I know what it is. So there's that. And then hey, it helped him too because he gets a good grade on the process. So, but again, what's ethical is C, the most ethical, but a lot of people judge ethics on fairness. But again, it can be a slippery slope, so you got to watch out for that as you're going through with this, which then goes into scenario 4. Again, discussion for if you go into Canvas, there's a scenario 4 that you're going to go over, and you're going to need to discuss your thoughts on that one. And there's the gray area, right? If what would you do? What should you do? Because it can be dicey. Great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man. So in summary, we went over what ethics are and why they're important, because the world doesn't work, right? If everyone cuts in line, what's going to go? If everyone's hacking each other, it's just going to go crazy. We have an expectation to do the right thing, right? We have an expectation to do the right thing. And it just said that great power comes with great responsibility. As you gain skills in cybersecurity, it's abundant upon you to just ask. A lot of times people are like, hey, well, we work with you. You want to test my system? But if you just start testing the system, there can be consequences, and legal consequences. We had a student who was hacking our systems, not maliciously, but saying, hey, look what I did. And like the one guy that ended up working for the FBI, we took the approach of, all right, look, don't do any more, or we will. We appreciate it, but don't do it again. But we want you to come and work for us, right? So if we give you permission to do something, like, all right, go test this system, then go test just that system. But until then, there's kids that didn't listen, and didn't follow that, they got in trouble, right? So this kid listened and didn't do anything else, and only so these are things to understand when you're thinking about the responsibility and the power of knowing. I mean, just because you can, you need to have permission. And then we talked about real world situations that people have been in, and the gray areas, because ethics is based on, and that first or second slide are like, hey, it's religion, it's your family, it's all your things together, and culture together brings together what should be acceptable and not acceptable. So with that, that is the concept of ethics. It's just doing the right thing. And if you ever have a question, go back to the concept of if this was to be published in the paper and everyone I know, the news, whatever, online, Facebook, and everyone was able to read what you did, how would you feel? That's a good start concept. I mean, obviously there are some people that they wouldn't care for just about anything, but those are good things to think about when you're going through ethics, and knowing, again, the biggest thing is permission, and then our next lesson is going to be on law. So again, that the whole bridge of, do you have permission? It might just be straight against the law, period. And then what is your company thinking about it? So with that, we'll see you next lesson. Have a good night.